So the passage we're going to look at today is Philemon. We're going to look at Philemon 1 verse 6. And Philemon received this letter, a short little letter. You can read it in about a minute and a half. And Paul wrote him this letter concerning one of Philemon's slaves named Onesimus. Now in this short little letter, Philemon is basically hearing the message, we've all got to be lifting together. Not spelled out quite in those words, but more or less, he's hearing the specific part that he needs to play in the church. You see, there's a valuable member of the church, and Philemon's got a beef with him. And Paul's writing to him saying that Philemon's faith needs to be demonstrated. It needs to express itself and be active so that this situation can get sorted out. And as it does, there's going to be some benefits. Philemon's going to have a full knowledge of Jesus. The church is going to grow. And so really he's hearing that as faith expresses itself through our lives, the whole church is going to be lifted up to new heights. And so, as we look at Philemon, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background. Philemon was a wealthy Christian, and as was common in his day, he owned a lot of slaves. They're the ones who ran the farms. They're the ones who did all of the work around his place. And one of his slaves, named Onesimus, was a man, for whatever reason, he ran away. Now, technically, slaves didn't have any rights. They weren't considered people, they were just property. And so when he ran away, that meant big trouble for him. There was a whole system in place with slave catchers. The slave catchers would gather information. Okay, who's run away? They'd post it in the markets and all the public places. Okay, so-and-so's run away. Here's the reward if you can catch him. And then they'd take the runaway slave back to the slave owner. And the slave owner would punish the runaway slave through beatings, brandings, inscriptions, through metal collars, in order to prevent them from future escape, and really to make a lesson to the other slaves of, don't run away, this is serious. Now, needless to say, Philemon would have had some friends and business associates who also owned slaves, and they'd expect each other, when they captured a runaway slave, to severely punish these guys to make a lesson, because the whole economy and political system, it was dependent on slavery. And so if you left a runaway slave unpunished, well, that would really put everything at risk, the prosperity, the stability of the system. Except here Philemon is receiving this letter written by Paul, who's in jail. And Paul had become friends with Onesimus, the runaway slave. Onesimus had heard about Jesus and had received Jesus and become a Christian. And so Paul writes this letter, and he sends Onesimus back to his slave owner, or his master, and he's asking Philemon to leave him unpunished, to accept him, and if he has any debt, the debt, Paul himself will pay that debt, and he needs to accept Onesimus as a brother. Now that put Philemon in a tricky spot. Was he going to allow his faith to express itself in this tricky situation? And so I want to quickly read through this book. I gave you the summary, I gave you the Richard version of it, but let's read the book of Philemon together and just see what it is that Paul is asking Philemon to do. So Paul introduces himself. He says, Paul, a prisoner of Christ Jesus, and Timothy our brother, to Philemon, our dear friend and fellow worker, to Apphia, our sister, and Archippus, our fellow soldier, and to the church that meets in your home. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. I always thank my God as I remember you in my prayers, because I hear about your faith in the Lord Jesus and your love for all the saints. I pray that you may be active in sharing your faith, so that you will have a full understanding of every good thing we have in Christ. Your love has given me great joy and encouragement, because you, brother, have refreshed the hearts of the saints. Therefore, although in Christ I could be bold in order to you to do what you ought to do, yet I appeal to you on the basis of love. I then, as Paul, an old man now and also a prisoner of Christ Jesus, I appeal to you for my son Onesimus, who became my son while I was in chains. Formerly he was useless to you, but now he's become useful both to you and to me. I'm sending him, who is my very heart, back to you. I would have liked to keep him with me so that he could take your place in helping me while I'm in chains for the gospel, but I did not want to do anything without your consent, so that any favor you do will be spontaneous and not forced. Perhaps the reason he was separated from you for a little while was that you might have him back for good, no longer as a slave, but better than a slave, as a dear brother. He's very dear to me, but dearer to you both as a man and a brother in the Lord. So, if you consider me a partner, welcome him as you would welcome me. If he has done you any wrong or owes you anything, charge it to me. I, Paul, am writing this with my own hand. I will pay it back. Not to mention that you owe me your very self. I do wish, brother, that I may have some benefit from you in the Lord. Refresh my heart in Christ. Confident of your obedience, I write to you, knowing that you will do even more than I ask. Oh, and one more thing. Prepare a guest room for me, because I hope to be restored to you in answer to your prayers. And then he gives some closing remarks. So Paul's writing this witty little letter. He's trying to capture the heart of Philemon, and he's trying to tell him, you need to accept this guy back. Not just as a slave and punish him, but you need to accept him back as a brother, because now he's a Christian. And I remember reading this letter and thinking, wow, Paul's pretty manipulative here. Did you hear the whole language that he's using? He's really just kind of going at him, and he's not really giving him a choice. He's saying, well, remember that I'm the one who told you about Jesus, and so really you owe me your whole life, and so basically you got to do whatever I ask. And then he gives the whole appeal of you've got to accept him as a slave, and by the way, prepare a guest room because I'm coming to check up on you. And so you can kind of get the sense that, wow, Paul's really going at this guy and really is wanting to make his case clear. And yet, as I've learned more about the gospel and the heart of the message of Jesus, I see that Paul's not just kind of using manipulation and cloaking it in religious language to get his own way. I see that Paul is really getting to the heart of the gospel message. So when Paul writes this letter, he's writing it as a letter to Philemon, and he's not just writing it to Philemon though. He's writing it to a few close friends to Philemon, as well as to the whole church that meets at Philemon's house. And so although it's a very personal issue, and it didn't affect really anybody else, he was the boss. He needed to decide what it was that he was going to do, and yet the letter was addressed to his church. Can you imagine if you had a personal issue you were dealing with, and someone wrote a letter, not just to you, but to your whole church, and we read that letter up front telling you how you needed to behave and what you needed to do? Wow, that would have a little bit of kick to it. But he's bringing the private issue into the public realm because faith is never a private issue. See, we're part of a family. As Philemon received Jesus into his life, he was forgiven by God. He was made right in the eyes of God because of the work that Jesus did, and God called him his child. God did the same thing for the others in his church. They're all called children of God, and so that means they've got the same father. That means they're brothers and they're sisters, and so they're a family. And so how one member in the family acts inevitably affects the rest of the family. And so how Philemon acts in this situation, although it's his own personal issue, it affects the whole wider body of the church. And so being part of God's family is one of the big themes throughout the New Testament. This fall, many of the small groups are going to be studying the book of Ephesians. And the book of Ephesians really draws out how we're a family, how we're a body, how we're a church, and how we function together as a body of believers. And I'm really excited about those studies that are coming up in our small groups. And here we see that Philemon receives this very personal letter, but it's addressed publicly to those who are close to him and part of his church. So faith is never a private issue. We're part of a family. And then verse 6 is the verse that we're going to really look at this morning. It says, I pray that you may be active in sharing your faith, so that you will have a full understanding of every good thing we have in Christ. So he needs to be active in sharing his faith. Now, usually when we hear about sharing our faith, what is it that you think about? Evangelism. I've got to go out and I've got to tell somebody about Jesus. They don't know about Jesus yet, and I know this good news, and I've got to go and tell them. Be it a neighbor, or a relative, or a co-worker, or someone, I've just got to go and share my faith. And that's a big part of sharing our faith, and God is on a mission, and he wants all people to know the everlasting life that Jesus gives. And he's given us the responsibility to share that around. But here in the context of this letter, Philemon is being told to be active in sharing his faith, not to go out and tell people about Jesus, but to be able to express his faith. The request is that he receives this runaway slave back as a brother. And so to share his faith really means that he needs to express his faith. His faith needs to be active and demonstrate itself by accepting and by reconciling together with this man that he has a problem with. And so when it says active in sharing his faith, let's look at the word active. Some other translations call it have a partnership in the faith, or have a communication of the faith. The older version of NIV says be active in sharing your faith. And active, you can think of a lot of similar words. You can think of, you got to be intentional. You got to be proactive. You got to be purposeful. You have to kind of decide, yes, this is what I'm going to do. It's not just something that you're just kind of waiting for, and maybe it'll happen or maybe it won't happen. And that's kind of the nature of faith, isn't it? If you just kind of sit around and wait for faith to happen, is it going to happen? No, I don't think so. Faith isn't just an automatic. We can't just pick and choose when we're going to have faith and when we aren't going to have faith. Well, yeah, that was really easy, and I really liked that idea of helping that person and serving that person, so I'm going to express my faith and help out there. But this one over here isn't quite so easy, and it's a little bit more inconvenient. We can't pick and choose when our faith is going to express herself. He's told, be active in sharing your faith. And so really, we can't just wait for opportunities to come. Now, every now and then an opportunity does come, like in the parable that Jesus told of the Good Samaritan. This man stumbles across a man that needs help, and he helps him. He wasn't going out and looking for an opportunity. He just stumbled across it. And every now and then that happens. And I'm afraid that too often that's the stance we take on our faith is we'll read wonderful verses saying that we need to be prepared always to give an answer for our faith. And so we sit and we wait and we say, maybe an opportunity is going to come my way and I'm going to be ready for it. And we sit and we wait for that opportunity. And yeah, we do need to be ready for that opportunity. But have you ever noticed how those opportunities are usually inconvenient? And they're not usually when we've got the time to do it or the resources to do it. And yeah, we need to take hold of those opportunities when they come our way. But when we think about being active in sharing our faith, I think it's more than just waiting for an opportunity to come to us, but we need to take the offensive stance, where we need to say, what are ways in which I can express my faith, where I can serve others, where I can love others, where I can be a benefit, where I can help lift up the whole body together. So we want to be proactive. We want to go out and look for opportunities. And so as you meet together in your small groups, week after week, you're praying, God, provide us with opportunities. You're talking about, well, my neighbor has this need, or I heard about someone else who has a need, and you're brainstorming, and you're thinking, and you're planning, and you're looking for opportunities. And it's like Bethlehem Star doesn't just happen. It's not like, oh, I guess it's just kind of that time of year again. It's just the tent's gonna pop up all by itself and everything's gonna happen. No, we gotta be active in that. We gotta be intentional for that to take place. And so, not only with opportunities, but with the gifts that you have, with the time that you have, the relationships that you have, the resources that you have, every part of our life, we want to be actively thinking, how can I express my faith? How can I share my faith so that others can see and so that the faith isn't just bottled up within me? Now think of Philemon if he wasn't active in sharing his faith. He'd see Onesimus coming back and he'd say, that's the guy that took off on me. That's my piece of property that left me and I didn't get so much work done because he was gone and I'm suffering for it. He needs to be punished and I need to punish him so that the other slaves don't get any bright ideas in their heads and run away. And he'd just follow the normal systems of the world around him. His whole culture expected that of him. That was the normal thing to do. And that's just what would happen. And no one probably would even think otherwise. And yet Paul's putting out the appeal. Philemon, be active in sharing your faith. Be ready. Look for opportunities. When you see Onesimus, how's your faith going to come into action here? How is your faith in Jesus going to set you apart from the culture around you and give you a path forward? You see, our faith guides our lives. And our faith comes because of who we're placing our faith in. Faith isn't just this substance of, I've got a lot of faith. No, our faith is specifically in Jesus. And so as our faith is in Jesus, really our whole identity, who we are, is wrapped up in Jesus. We are children of God, and that leads to how we live. And so here we've got Paul writing to Philemon, and he's really telling him, your faith needs to express itself in every area of your life. Your identity is a child of God, and that leads you to how you live. And he's not really given Philemon any choices here, is he? When you read through this letter, there isn't really a multiple choice. All right, here's a few options you can have. When you see him and you beat him, just hold back a little bit because, well, he's a Christian now, and you don't want to beat him too hard. That's option A. Option B is, well, maybe don't even give him a beating. Be really nice to him, but make sure you can jab him every now and then. Say, hold it over his head. Well, you ran away, and I'm going to make you work extra hard. And you kind of hold that over him. And option C, well, is if you're really having a nice day and it's not too inconvenient for you, well, please accept him as a brother and treat him really. Now, Paul doesn't give him the whole multiple choice thing. He's saying, Philemon, you're a child of God. You're that way because of who God is and what he's done for you. And because you're a child of God, how are you going to live like it? And he just spells it out. You're a child of God, and so you're going to accept people. There is no A, B, or C. And we don't want to get that backwards. Many times we come to think, okay, maybe Philemon's thinking, if I accept that guy, God will be really happy with me. And then God will approve of me, and he'll say, Philemon, you're just a really great guy. And then he'll be all right with God. And now that's backwards thinking, because it doesn't work that way. It starts with God, who takes the initiative, and God says, Philemon, I know that you're a person, you've turned your back on me, you've got your own sin, you've got your own rebellion, and yet he sent his own son to die on the cross. And God accepted Jesus, God approved of Jesus, and through faith in Jesus, God approved of Philemon. And because God has approved of Philemon, now Philemon is a child of God, and he's able to live differently. Have you ever noticed how when people have troubles with their self-esteem, maybe they don't feel adequate, they don't feel approved of, and they kind of slouch a bit and mope around, and they're not super confident, and they're always kind of tentative when they're talking to people. And then maybe all of a sudden that person will get a boyfriend or girlfriend. And then they feel, wow, someone really likes me. Someone approves of me. They stand up a little taller, they're a little bit more confident because that person approves of me. That means I'm an okay person, and now I can be a little bit more confident in how I'm living. Imagine if the God who created the heavens and the earth were to approve of you. How would that change your whole demeanor in life? Wouldn't that allow you to stand up and say, the whole culture around me says, beat that runaway slave, but I'm going to accept him as a brother because that's what he is. And it can change your whole way of being. So our faith, our identity is as children of God, and that leads to how we live. So that's kind of what needed to take place. Paul is writing to Philemon and says, here's what needs to happen. Your faith needs to express itself in every area of your life. And then he gives him some motivation. He says the whole church is going to be lifted to new heights. And so the motivation is really, why on earth should he allow his faith to express himself? He should allow faith to express itself because the whole church is going to be lifted to new heights. And so in verse 6 it says, I pray that you may be active in sharing your faith so that you'll have a full understanding of every good thing we have in Christ. Did you get the motivation there? So that we can have a full understanding of every good thing we have in Christ. I like it how Paul doesn't recruit Philemon towards his task like we try and recruit volunteers sometimes. All right, people, we've got a lot of work here. There's a lot of empty spaces, and if we don't get you to help us out, this whole thing is not going to work. And it's your duty to serve, and it's a duty, and it's also a privilege. And because I said so, or because God said so, and we've got all different tactics to try and motivate people. And yet Paul's motivation here is very different. He's bringing it back to the very heart of the gospel message. He's saying, as your faith expresses itself in every area of your life, you're going to know Jesus more. He says, you'll have a full understanding of every good thing that we have in Christ. Now, what is it, all these good things that we have in Christ? What is the best thing that Jesus has to offer you? There's all sorts of blessings that we read throughout the scripture. We understand the peace he gives us joy, he gives us hope, he fills us with contentment. There's all sorts of things that Jesus has, but what's the very best thing that Jesus can give you? Is it not himself? And to be able to present us to his Father, God Almighty? That's a pretty good thing that Jesus has to give us. And that's the motivation that Paul is giving to Philemon. He's saying, Philemon, accept that runaway slave, and as you accept him, you're going to have a full understanding of all the good things you have in Jesus. You're going to fully know Jesus. You're going to know him more and more. And that's a theme that runs throughout the scriptures. Ever since creation, when God created people, God would go and walk in the garden with Adam and Eve so that they could know him, they could be with him, they could understand who he is, and they could have that relationship with him. Of course, when Adam and Eve turned their backs on God and said, we've got a better idea, we know how to please ourselves, we want to become like God, that broke the relationship with God. They couldn't be with God. They couldn't know God, they couldn't understand God, and God became distant. And yet all throughout the scriptures, God is working to be able to show himself, to be able to reveal himself to his people. When God was making covenants with the Israelites, he said, I will be your God and you will be my people. So that we could know God, so that we could know who he is, so that he's not distant, that he's not foreign in our lives, but that he's intimately involved in every area of our life. And then the whole reason that Jesus came was to be able to give himself. Where Jesus was called Emmanuel, God with us, so that we could see God here, where God became flesh, God with skin on, Jesus incarnate. We could see Jesus and we could know him. And then the prayers throughout the New Testament, I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection, to be able to share with him even in his sufferings. To be able to know Jesus is the ultimate, because knowing Jesus is knowing God. And having God intimately involved in every area of our life. In 1 John, I've really been encouraged reading through that book. And it says, we will be like him, for we shall see him as he is. And one day when we see Jesus face to face, it's going to transform us. Because we'll see him. And when we see him, we'll be like him. And so that's the motivation that's given to Philemon. Yeah, Philemon, you've got a tricky task. To have reconciliation with this person, to be able to express your faith. And yet, as your faith expresses itself, you're going to know Jesus. Now, how does that practically play out? Like, how does that work? So imagine Philemon's there, and he's sitting on his front porch, and then he sees Onesimus coming back. That's my slave that ran away. What am I going to do? And there he makes a decision. And he says to Onesimus, he says, I heard that you've accepted Jesus into your life. Onesimus says, yes, sir. And that makes you a child of God. Yes, sir. And I'm also a child of God. That makes you my brother. Onesimus gets a little smile on his face, and he says, welcome home, brother. Onesimus is just shocked because he's like, aren't you going to beat me and make me your slave again? And he sets him free. He's no longer a slave, but he accepts him as a brother. What's Philemon going to be like when he attends the church service on Sunday with his other brothers and sisters? As the people are singing out songs of praise to God, is Philemon just going to be mumbling the words along and just kind of standing there while everyone's saying? No. Philemon's heart is just going to be bursting with joy because that's what God does when our faith is active and alive. So Philemon's just going to be belting out those songs, just singing with gusto, and he's just going to be so full of praise of God because that's what happens. As our faith expresses itself, we begin to have a fuller knowledge of Jesus and all the good things that he has for us. And then when we meet together with other believers, we just can't contain it, and our eyes light up and our voices shout out even if our tone doesn't match the songs. We can't help but sing aloud, sing songs of praise. And then when the word of God is read together at his church, you think Philemon's just kind of going to be slouching back, falling asleep? No. He's going to be hearing things that he hadn't really grasped before because his faith just expressed itself in action. And then as the word is read and taught on, he's going to be like, yeah, that's kind of like when me and Onesimus. And he's going to be hearing new things. He's going to be recharged. He's going to be energized. And he's going to go out from that place and say, God is so good. I just love Jesus more. And so personally, Philemon's going to be recharged as his faith expresses itself. But what's going to happen to his church? He comes into church and he's sitting next to Onesimus. It's like that elephant in the room. Oh, what's going on here? And it's testimony time because they had a small church in a house, just like we have our small groups that meet in homes. And they share testimonies. They tell what God's been doing in their lives. And Philemon's going to say, you guys know Onesimus? Onesimus actually means useful. And it was a typical slave name because, hey, useful, come put yourself to some use over here. And so hey, okay, everyone, here's Onesimus. Onesimus is now one of us. He's a brother in Christ. I've set him free. He's no longer a slave, but he's a brother, and he's part of our whole family of believers here. How's the church going to worship that Sunday when they meet together? I think there's going to be a little bit more spark in their singing. I think there's going to be a little bit more life in their eyes, a little bit more joy in their heart because, whoa, that's absolutely crazy what Philemon just did. That's unheard of. I can't believe it. And yet they see Philemon worshiping God, and it's contagious. Faith is contagious, and it builds others up. And they also, when they hear the word of God, they're going to be like, that's exactly what Philemon did. He understood his position as a child of God, and he lived it out in his lives. I wonder how I can do that. And so as Philemon lifts others up by expressing his faith, when others are lifted, they're going to express their faith, and they'll be lifting others up, and the whole church is going to be lifted to new heights because they're lifting together. Personally, Philemon's built up. The church is built up. What's going to happen in the community? Hey, did you hear Onesimus returned? He wasn't even beaten. Philemon accepted him back as a brother. Crazy. It's going to destroy our whole system. Some people are going to be furious and mad and say, Philemon's out of his mind. These Christians, what are they thinking? What are other people going to think, though? Aren't they going to be attracted to that? Or curious, saying, what on earth are these Christians up to that they can show a love and an acceptance like that? And the community's going to be talking and thinking. And so faith expressed is always going to elevate yourself and those around you. So what's it going to be like here at Emmanuel Baptist? We've got our kickoff Sunday, and we're thinking specifically about the different ministries of our church. How are you going to express your faith? So we've got kind of your personal issues, and we've got our kind of our corporate issues as a family of believers in the ways that we can help each other out. And all of it is working together to be able to lift up the body of believers. Now, I'm sure you've already experienced that on many different levels when your faith has expressed itself, and it is just contagious and it bubbles out to those around you. And my prayer is, as we go into this fall, that each one of us will be active in sharing our faith. And as each one of us is active in sharing our faith, that we'll have a full understanding of the good things that we have in Christ Jesus. And so we've seen these rocks, and we've seen us kind of lift together these rocks, but we're not done with these rocks yet, because there's a lot of rocks here. And what I'm going to do in just a moment is that I'm going to invite you to come on up front, take a rock and take a pen, and write on the rock. The way I'm going to help lifting together is, maybe you're going to help out in the Sunday school, maybe you're going to help out with a prayer ministry, maybe you're going to help out as an usher. There's a lot of different ways that we can help out, and you can go to the gym and you can see a lot of different opportunities. So in a moment I'm going to invite you to come up front, and so think about that a little bit. But we want our faith to express itself in every area of our life. And sometimes it's hard to think, what is faith? So when you're having an argument with your spouse, can you argue in faith? Like, is that even possible? I think it is. And so you can work that out. Okay, as we're sorting through things and we're bickering a little bit and we're not quite on the same page, how is my faith going to express itself so even in this disagreement, the love of Jesus is shining through and faith is expressing itself? Or as you're sitting around and you're talking about your job or your boss or the government, how is your faith expressing itself in those conversations? Maybe you're putting the kids to bed and they don't want to go to bed yet. Or you're trying to get them to do their chores and they're not doing a very good job at it. How does your faith express itself as you're leading your children and as you're working with them? Maybe you're talking over the fence with your neighbor, you're golfing with a friend, all these different things that we do with people. How is your faith expressing itself? So that you're showing love, that you're being gracious, you're building others up with your words, and you're reflecting the glory of God through your lives. There's also serving at Sunday school, greeting people at the door, helping tidy up around the church, inviting people to Bethlehem Star, serving at Bethlehem Star. There's a lot of different ways in which we can come together and have our faith express itself. So we want to be active, and that's why I'm going to invite you to come and take a rock so you can think, okay, what are some of the ways that I can be part of this church and help lift up this church together? Now, I think Bethlehem Star is a no-brainer. I think most every rock is going to write Bethlehem Star because that's one of the wonderful ministries our church is going to do. It's also a great model to be able to show our kids. Kids watch our lives. They see where we spend our time. They see where our hearts are at. And so as we say, family, we're going to be involved in Bethlehem Star together. The kids are going to say, hey, my parents really value this church and the ministries here. And that's going to be able to lead your family as you're doing that. Small groups, that's one of the critical ministries of our church. You can't possibly get to know everyone sitting here on a service, and then there's a second service. But through our small group ministries, there's all the friendships that develop through that. There's the testimonies you get to share, the building each other up in those more intimate settings, the times of prayer. I'm really excited about going through the book of Ephesians and seeing how just the very practical ways in which we live together as a family of believers. Having a little bit more of a prayer initiative this fall. Starting next Sunday at 8 a.m., I'm going to be downstairs in the prayer room. I welcome you to join me to be able to pray for our church, to be able to pray for the ministries, to be able to pray for our city. So come on out Sunday mornings at 8 o'clock to be able to spend some time in prayer. Also, next Monday, so not tomorrow, but the following Monday, we're going to start a week of prayer, an unbroken chain of prayer. And so in the gym, you can sign up for a half-hour chunk. Monday morning at 1:30 in the morning, I'm going to set my alarm and wake up and pray for our church, and we'll give you some direction on how to pray. And there's all the different time slots throughout the week, and we're going to have a whole chain of prayer going out throughout the week. There's a lot of different ways for us to be involved in different ministries. And there's also different ways outside of this building. Because church isn't just this building. Church is who we are as a family of believers. And so maybe you're highly involved in your kids' sports programs, and you say, that's a ministry that my small group's going to be praying for. That's a ministry that I'm going to be involved in. We're going to go to the BMX track, and that's where we want to see Jesus lifted up and elevated. And you're going to write BMX track on this, and people are going to say, that's not a ministry. And yet it is a way for you to express your faith. And so, we've read, I pray that you may be active in sharing your faith so that you'll have a full understanding of the good things, every good thing we have in Christ.